we hit record. So we're going to be obviously meeting online on Thursday nights. We will hopefully never, ever, ever be going until 8:55 each evening. Our goal is to go at about one chapter per week, doing a couple activities, a little bit of breakout room work. So effectively, we're going to get done hopefully in a little less than 2 hours. But this is with the understanding that you have a solid amount of work outside of class to do for this. You're going to be reading the chapters, and then obviously you're going to be contributing to the best of your ability in the wonderful time that we have right now to these conversations. Now, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. Wait, what was that cough, honey? Sorry, that's my wife. I'm not going to insult your intelligence and read this to you, but my office phone number is not a bad thing to use. But the cool thing is with our university is my phone goes through my handy dandy laptop, and for some reason it's been on the fritz. So I only get voicemails. So you might as well just shoot me an email, but I'm more than comfortable with giving you guys my phone number. I will probably not save your number in my phone. So you're going to have to kind of reintroduce yourself. I know that's kind of a jerk thing to do, but this is a student teacher situation. We can be friends after you guys are done being my student, and it's more than understandable that you guys don't like me and never want to hang out. That's cool. We'll not judge. I'm not going to insult your intelligence with reading the course description. Now, when it comes to the book, this is obviously a much older edition. Go ahead and get it. You can get the first edition if you can find it. They haven't made substantial changes in nutrition that we won't talk about in lecture anyways, that you guys are going to have to go ahead and get the most recent edition of the text. The reason I laugh is I literally just saw my wife walking by giving my dog the finger because it looked like he was going to go for some food that she just got done cooking. So we are going to be covering, obviously, all of these different learning objectives. I'm not going to insult your intelligence to read it to you. However, the thing that you guys need to understand, because we have both undergraduate and graduate students, is that there's a little bit different assessments between the two. Exams, you're going to take essentially 3 of them. They are going to be cumulative. You're going to take it once as an individual and then once as a group. And we're going to let you guys put together the group however you guys want to put it together. This can be with friends that you study with. Graduate students, there's 3 of you. Congratulations, you guys are one group of 3. Undergrads, there's 20 of you, so you guys got some more essentially flexibility there, and we're going to make sure that the folks that can't live stream the lectures are able to do so. Now, you're going to have this energy metabolism project that you're going to work on throughout the semester. We're going to introduce it obviously this evening and have you guys do a little bit of work, kind of baseline on it, of figuring out, okay, calories in, calories out, how are my micronutrients looking, how am I trending? So you're getting a good idea of like the systemic changes you're going to see, progress that you're going to hopefully get depending on what type of dietary intervention you do with yourself. Now, each week that we do not have an exam, we're going to have a quiz. The quiz is going to be over the chapter that we are effectively covering that week. So you're going to have to, like I said, read ahead, look at the slides. And then from there, you'll take that quiz. It's also going to be cumulative based upon previous information you've also covered. Now, each week, there's going to be homework chapters you're going to do. And those homework chapters are going to be multiple choice quizzes that you can take as many times as you want. It only records your highest grade. That's going to be worth effectively 10 points. And it's an easy way to help kind of buffer your grade up higher. So make sure you're taking those quizzes. Now, we're going to also be doing a journal article project, which is going to come in 2 pieces, where effectively you're going to go ahead and analyze some peer-reviewed research. You'll be doing a review article. So a peer-reviewed review article for your first one. And then your second is going to be where you're going to write your own mini review. So it's going to be at least 10 articles that are peer-reviewed in the area that you found interesting. And obviously the graduate students, because it's highlighted, you get to present it to the class. Good news is, we're living in this world. So you'll just record your slides and I'll post them on Blackboard. So no one has to worry about presentation anxiety. And then there's going to be some other potential extra credit opportunities as we go through. Obviously, it'll be announced. Any questions, comments, concerns so far? For those of you that are familiar with it, you should be able to hit under, I think it's like there's a reaction button or there's a, under, if you click participants, you'll see like a yes, no, go slower, go faster. If all you guys can go ahead and just hit the yes button or no button accordingly, as in, yes, I have a question, no, I do not have a question, so I can see where everybody's at and how good we are at using those tools as of right now. All right, Allie, if you can, either unmute yourself or type in what your question is. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. All right, guys. So obviously you're going to be able to see all your grades on Blackboard. They're always going to be uploaded on there. I'm going to try to do my best to stay on top of the grading, so you've always got a good working idea where you are. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if you don't do an assignment, you don't take a quiz, you don't turn in a homework, it doesn't immediately give you a 0 grade. I have to put that in manually. So you can have an overestimate of what your grade really is if you are not staying on top of things and making sure that you're getting it on time. Everything on Blackboard should have an appropriate due date, so you know when these things are due. You're going to be able to stay on top of them. Now, attendance policy, who cares? It's COVID. We can just kind of skip it. Effectively, you need to show up, but a lot of you guys I know have some other extenuating circumstances, and I'm speaking to the ones that are watching the recording right now. So we're good. Just win it out, guys. Communicate with me. Things are going to happen. I've already had a number of students pop with COVID because they were home, and otherwise it's not a character judgment. It's just the reality of the world we're living in. So if something's happened, let me know. We don't have to worry about showing up late to class because COVID. You can look up when you can drop the class if you need to. Don't worry about the cell phone policy because that might be how you're watching it. The CSA statement is a big thing, guys. If you have anything, any issues that's going to require you to need a little more time on the quizzes or otherwise, please, please, please make sure you get that communicated with me. Give me that documentation as soon as possible. Please don't cheat, please don't cheat, please don't cheat. My classes aren't that easy, so yeah, you probably need to know it anyways, and you're not going to be able to really take the exam next to anybody, and I am even asking you to take it with a group of people, so hopefully this isn't an issue. The non-discrimination and harassment, Title IX prevention statement. If someone's being a jerk, report it. Please let me know if you do tell me things, I have to report it myself. Just don't be a jerk, and if someone is being a jerk, report it, and hopefully that'll get taken care of. Yeah, I love the official email statement, which was probably like a brand spanking new thing. Oh, let's say a little over 20 years ago, but now it's a little old hat, but fair enough. This is just giving you a little bit more information on those exams where we're going to have a combination of multiple choice, true, false, short answers and matching. And then we're going to have ourselves some short answer questions where you're going to have to go ahead and think through what's effectively is going on. The energy metabolism project, which is where you're going to take 2 different 4-day blocks and look at your total caloric intake, look at your total activity expenditure, and then look at effectively some micronutrients and try to figure out overall, like, where you, in theory, going to gain weight, going to lose weight, how is your diet matching up to what your overall goals are. The journal article summary, which we talked about earlier, where you're going to go ahead and do that review. And notice these are research articles, so we're not using Shape Magazine, Cosmo, Muscle and Fitness, etc. We are using PubMed, Google Scholar, and then we're going to be making sure that we're using Journal of Applied Physiology, Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. We're using actual peer-reviewed journal articles. So there's going to be a variety of assignments. All those are going to be placed on Blackboard. Make sure that you are staying on top of those where you have the homework quizzes. And then we have a number of basic nutrition assignments where you're going to be given a budget where you have to hit certain macro and micronutrient goals. And so you have to then be able to reference foods from grocery stores and ways to effectively hit those goals. AKA, if you want to have a really bad or really sad diet, but it's really cheap to hit your macronutrient goals, it's effectively the all-white diet. It's eggs, milk, and rice. Real cheap, and you can get pretty much all your macros in that way. It's just going to be a very sad diet. This is a further breakdown of the energy metabolism project, so you can kind of see what all is going to be required. And this is all in the syllabus. You guys can go through it. And I, directly say what you need to have to gain each of these 5 points. Notice it's yes or no. So did it, 5 points, didn't, 0. And it makes it really easy for me to grade, but obviously it can be rough because folks will skip over things, especially when it comes to the graphs and doing the graph comparison when it comes to bar graphs and showing what's going on with, are we getting in enough, are we not? And then a basic summary to help you be mindful of what's going on. Same thing here when it comes to the rubric for your journal article project. So you have an idea of making sure that you're doing enough. This is for the final review, that you have enough of them. Are we relevant? Are we summarizing it? Are we comprehending it? And are we discussing it? We're going to obviously keep talking more about it as we go. The presentation, this part is only important for our wonderful graduate students. And it's really meant to be really easy. And then this is just some things to kind of have you guys think about as we're going through, and then effectively when all this is going to be done, or when it's going to be due. And then we get to our tentative course outline. There's nothing like a plan. Plan is nothing more than a list of things that never happens. So we've got effectively the topic we're going to cover, the chapters in the text, and anything extra that's going to be due and otherwise. Once again, guys, check Blackboard. All that's going to be updated. You know when everything is going to be coming. It's right there. And if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, please, please, please let me know. So any questions with the syllabus and expectations so far? Thank you, Dalton. Got a lot of silence from the rest of the group here, and that's okay. All right, so now up in the chat, I want you guys, and this is going to be all one post. So I want you to post this all in there, not one piece at a time, but I want you to go ahead and give us your preferred name, comma, okay, what year you are. So like, are you a senior? Are you a junior, sophomore, graduate student, etc.? What your career goals are, or kind of what are you trying to do with the major? What's going on here? And then give us your, let's have fun, your COVID hobby, something that you've picked up during this. And doom scrolling is an option. I don't think that's a really useful thing for us, but we can go and bring up whatever you're in the mood for. And then finally, one interesting fact. And since I've had a number of you guys in class before, I'm not going to let you guys get away with the same interesting facts. You're going to have something else. You're going to have something else to throw in there. So go ahead and type out each of those things, and then go ahead and just click enter and send it on the chat. And then I might have a simple little follow-up question for you guys, because I like to take an interest in my students in their life. Kristen, did you do the Appalachian Trail?
I did in 2012.
That's awesome.
Thanks. It started a lifelong hobby. It also led to me getting Lyme disease, but there were a lot of good things that came from it too.
That's awesome. That's on my friend's bucket list. That's
They should do it.
You say that, but you know what it actually takes. So that's really cool.
Thanks.
The class. Oh, Brent, I already knew that about you, bud. I know about your baseball thing. You got to give me something else. Huh. Good for you, Tori, on the rock climbing and snowshoeing.
Thanks.
Nice, Alex. Why not a nice chicken parmesan? Why does it have to be mean? Okay, let's see here. Yeah, that does not sound like a bad place to be for COVID there, Lucas. Oh, good for you, Haley. You'll have to let us know how soon that is. How long ago was the last time you danced at Abby?
It was my senior year of high school, so almost 4 years ago, I think. Yeah, around there.
Nice. And Nathan, you need to get that handstand push-up back without the wall. Katie, good choice. My little sister just got my wife and I into Bridgerton. We're on like episode 8.
It's a really good show. I can't stop watching it.
Just the timepieces and oh my God, like I love the one line of when you're talking to the lady's daughter, put that book down, it will confuse your mind. It's like, wow.
Yeah, it's a really good
Man.
show. I'm trying to get my fiance started on it, but he doesn't want to take part in it.
Hey, it's okay. Different strokes, different folks. And congrats getting into PT school there, Jared. Okay. Yeah. Ah, Jackson, that's neat. Yeah, Chris Schrock is on the state board for the NSCA with me. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. Nice, Lewis. Okay, so Dalton, you got to let me know what the current favorite video game and anime is. And yeah, I remember you telling me about the locker thing. That's brutal.
Favorite video game?
Mm-hmm.
Probably God of War 2018.
Nice.
And favorite anime? Dang. Probably Dragon Ball Z.
Awesome. Raquan, what's your video game of choice these days? And Diana, that's pretty darn cool. And I swear I see you in the gym every time I'm there, and I'm not there that often, so good for you. Interesting, Trendon. You guys let us know what type of songs. Oh man, just sneaking under the wire there with your thing there, Tyler. Good job. Nice, good for you, Allie. It's pretty cool, Donovan. Nice. Awesome, guys. Well, welcome back. I obviously normally get to see a lot of you guys, but obviously we're doing things a little differently here. With that, we're going to go ahead and switch over and we're going to start lecturing. So effectively, is this big enough, so to speak, so that you guys can see it and kind of see my slide the way I've got it shared?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. So effectively, we're first going to start off by talking about really what is nutrition and what's a nutrient. So when we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about everything that goes into getting the food into our body and then getting it to do whatever we're hoping for it to do. And so all the different processes that are involved from the beginning to the end. This is from obviously chewing, mastication, swallowing into our digestion, absorbing it, and then metabolizing it. And so there's going to be a lot of basic statements I'm going to throw out there that are actually very important concepts to get, which is you only actually get what you absorb. So you can eat a lot of food, but if you're not digesting it, then and you're not absorbing it, then it turns out you didn't actually get that nutrition. And I'm sure every single person in this class has eaten corn before and not fully chewed it and saw bits and pieces of corn a second time. So you didn't actually absorb it. Now, a nutrient is an individual substance within nutrition that is going to be performing one or more functions in the body. So things like carbohydrates not just serve as a fuel source, but they're also going to serve for literally some type of, or some of the cell signaling molecules we have on the exterior. So it's glycolated, well, glycolation of proteins is a bad thing, and that's more of an effect of diabetes, but glucose is actually used for signaling components on the outside of our cells, along with ribose, which is a type of carbohydrate, is obviously really important when it comes to our genetic material. So these nutrients are going to help us grow and develop. And obviously, when you think of growth, we think of protein, we think of potentially calcium and other minerals. It's going to give us energy, which is going to be mostly the lion's share here is going to be done by carbohydrates and fats. And then we're going to have everything that's important for regulating our metabolism. So this is going to be our vitamins and minerals, protein, and to a lesser extent, carbohydrates and fat are going to be important. So whenever we're talking about carbs, we're talking about fats, talking about proteins, we're going to realize that there's a lot of individual subclasses. So carbohydrates immediately break down into our simple carbohydrates. So those are mono and disaccharides. And then we have our polysaccharides. So these are a longer chain, mono meaning one sugar, monosaccharide, disaccharides meaning two sugars put together, trisaccharides, 3, and then oligosaccharides, which is like 4 to 10, but polys when we go over 11, and that's our starches, more of our complex carbohydrates. Fiber is a type of polysaccharide. However, we do not have the enzymatic ability to break it down. And certain bacteria do, certain animals have this ability. And so this is why if you eat a lot of fiber, it adds to, shall we simply call it fecal bulk. So it's important for regular digestion, but it's important to understand that obviously not all these carbs are the same. In fact, fiber is absorbed after being fermented by your gut microbiome into short chain fatty acids. So you actually absorb fiber as a fat, not as a carb. That's why you see some like keto friendly foods and otherwise that are high fiber, which would make you think it's more carbohydrate, but that's actually not the form it's absorbed in. So carbohydrates, for the most part, are going to be the major energy source for our nervous system. Our brain and the rest of our nervous system is pretty much trying to run off of only carbohydrates. Our red blood cells can only use carbohydrates as fuel because they literally do not have mitochondria. And then your muscles, specifically in that storage form of glycogen, is going to be the preferred fuel source when we happen to be doing moderate to high intensity exercise. And we can store it as glycogen, which has its pros and cons. We'll get into more when we get to that chapter. But this is a nutrient that we're consistently having to replenish because we're chewing through it pretty much every single day. We also do store a decent amount of it aside from inside of our muscles, but in our liver. And the carbohydrate that's in our liver, that's the one that can go everywhere in the body. So I'm sure all of you guys have seen the wonderful demonization of sugar and its links to things like obesity, diabetes, and otherwise. The key is like anything else, it's really not. The problem with sugar intake is a little bit more nuanced. So in the chat, guys, go ahead and put in a food, and you can actually see the sources of carbohydrates there that happens to be effectively, it's just sugar without any fiber, without any nutrients. What's a simple example there? Nice, cotton candy. That's a solid choice. Yes, soda. I know you're Canadian, so you're not used to doing as much pop and soda as we do around here. But yes, it's pretty much sugar water with some carbonation. Yes, pixie sticks, rock candy. Man, you guys are just hitting all the high points of a decent Halloween night. After that, we'll go do some Starbursts and some Skittles. Now, yes, we absorb these sugars rapidly. It's going to cause our blood sugar to spike. But the big key here is what type of individuals are going to naturally are going to burn through a lot of this glycogen and are going to be burning through it rapidly. So they might even want to take and eat some cotton candy while they're training. Yes, but what type of athletes, Kristen? Because some people would argue that golfers are athletes, and I would not. Could be long distance. Good. What else, guys? Bingo. People doing a lot of high intensity work. They're doing a lot of repeats. People that have a pretty good metabolic stress in their sport, like basketball, rugby, football, even depending on obviously how much you're playing. Softball, if you're a pitcher or catcher, it's going to potentially, how the game's going, be relatively energetically requiring. But practice for a lot of sports in general is going to be pretty glycolytic. So if you're an athlete that happens to be chewing through a lot of carbs and you need to replenish your glycogen quickly, yeah, using high carb supplementation, or sorry, simple sugar carbohydrate supplementation is not a bad idea, because it's very simple foods to eat. They're rapidly digested and they're pretty light. Potentially, Lucas, depending on how much volume you're doing. So for the strongman and Olympic lifters, if you're doing a very like just a bunch of doubles and triples, you're using that ATP PCR system a lot more, which can then be replenished by either aerobic glycolysis or obviously beta oxidation. So you don't necessarily need a higher carb intake, but if you're doing a lot of work, then yeah, potentially you can be looking at a much higher intake. So the big issue is, I like to think of simple sugars as like jet fuel. Now, you put jet fuel in jets because that's what they use. What would happen if you put jet fuel into your 20 to 30-year-old car that's like barely holding together right now? What do you think is going to happen to that car, guys? Is it, Tyler? This is not Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I'm showing my age with throwing out that reference. Yeah, it's probably gonna destroy your vehicle. Yeah, exactly, Tori. So the problem isn't so much the sugar, the problem is the mismatch of effectively dietary decisions to individuals' health. So you can eat anything you want. The key is, like anything else, everything that you do has repercussions. Yesterday, I picked things up and I put them down, deadlifting, and it was quite heavy. Slipped a rib. My shoulder and neck hurts pretty decently, but that's the cost of doing business. Now, I understood those risks. It happened, and I'm now paying for the repercussions. Now, the key is just to be mindful if you're just going to sit around and eat the list of solidly tasty, high sugar foods and then not be physically active and probably have other lifestyle issues like smoking, yeah, go figure, you're probably going to live a shorter life and a lower quality one at that. But still, we're here to help make people essentially healthier or to maintain their health. We're not here to shame people. That's for the internet and social media to do. One line to keep in mind, guys, and remind me of this because I fall short of this all the time, which is ask yourself, are you increasing someone's ability to change or are you increasing their desire to change? So in the chat, what can you guys give me that would be an example of increasing someone's desire to change, but that does not, in fact, increase their ability to change? Okay, helping set goals actually is probably gonna be a way to help improve their ability to change. But giving somebody a cash reward, it's like, okay, now you give me a desire to change, but you haven't actually increased their ability to change. They don't know how to change. They just know like, well, if I change, I get money. And obviously things like nutrition, exercise can be, relatively hard for some folks to develop systems that are going to work consistently for them. So just keep in mind, are we increasing someone's desire to change or are we increasing their ability to change? Unfortunately, let's face it, making fun of people is effectively increasing their desire to change, but it's not actually increasing their ability to change. So When it comes to fiber, it also comes in two different flavors. Soluble fiber, which is the type that we're going to be able to eventually break down a bit more and use for effectively those fermented energies, and the insoluble, which you're just going to be passing it through the backside and with little to no change to it. I'm sure if any of you guys ever had too many raspberries, blueberries in a sitting, you maybe saw those seeds later, or if you ever had flax seeds that weren't milled, and then you realize once again, you probably need to chew a bit more. But it definitely seems like fiber has a relationship with effectively decreasing risks for a number of chronic diseases and cancers. Now, the problem here is correlation and causation are two separate things, okay? If you guys look at the sources of food on the right side, when it comes to things that have fiber in it, what do you not see on that list? AKA, it's foods that don't have fiber. Mm-hmm. Good, John. You don't see a lot of processed foods. And Lewis, you don't see a lot of meat, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You don't see soda. You don't see the list of all the other candies we talked about earlier. You don't see fried foods. So if you're naturally eating a diet that's higher in these foods, well, you're probably also naturally eating a diet that has less of the other things. So does that make sense, guys, how it's a hard thing to parse between the two? Go ahead and put that up in the polling if it makes sense, or if you need me to dive down a little bit more for there. Awesome. So now we're going to get a bit more complicated than you guys have probably ever been before in your life when it comes to fat. Okay. So when we're talking about lipids, these are hydrophobic carbon-based molecules that are pretty much just configurations of carbon and hydrogen with an occasional oxygen thrown in there. Okay. Now, the greater amount of essentially what is known as a double bond that you're going to find in here, the more likely this fat is going to be liquid at room temperature. Sorry, one of my cats is kind of doing a little cry. I might have to check on him in a moment. Now, when it comes to our saturated fats, that literally means there's not a single double bond. When we're talking about our monounsaturated fats, this is where we're going to see one double bond. Saturated meaning it's saturated with hydrogen, because the blue dots are going to be carbon, but what you don't see around them is hydrogen. And there's going to be 3 hydrogen around this one, 2 around this one, 2 around this one. So here, there's only 1 hydrogen off of the 9th and 10th carbon. So then we get into our polyunsaturated fatty acids, and that's where we're going to have more than 1 double bond. In fact, linoleic acid and linolenic acid are our 2 essential fatty acids, meaning we literally need these to live. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You can live the rest of your life without ever taking in a carbohydrate. And I wouldn't say you'd be great, but you could do it. Okay. Now, fats are not just important as fuel when it comes to moderate to low intensity exercise and really just the rest of the day when you're being sedentary, but it's going to be important for padding throughout your body. It's going to be important for vitamin essentially uptake, so that you're going to be able to absorb your A, D, E, and K. Those are our 4 fat soluble vitamins. It is going to literally be making up our cellular membranes in our body, and not just be important for further fat digestion when it comes to cholesterol in our bile, but remember, cholesterol, guys, is the major precursor to all of our sex hormones, along with our stress hormones, our stress hormone with cortisol, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Remember, that's off of the amino acid tyrosine. And it's going to be important with creating aldosterone, which is going to be another big component of fluid regulation in the body. Now, we're also going to be needing that linoleic acid when it comes to signaling for what's known as echonosoids, we're going to touch on later on. And it turns out fat tastes freaking great. Anyone that's ever had fat-free ice cream and then had full fat ice cream, you know what I'm talking about. It is so much better and enjoyable. And it also is going to typically give you more satiety. Now, what we have here, guys, is what's known as a triglyceride. So that's going to be a glycerol group that then has 3 fatty acids bonded to it. And then what we have here, guys, is what's known as a lipoprotein. So when we talk about HDL, LDL, that simply means high density lipoprotein or low density lipoprotein. And so it's being made of obviously proteins, cholesterol, phospholipids, different esters, and triglycerols that happen to be inside of it. Now, cholesterol is also really important for structural integrity of your cells. If you do not have enough cholesterol in your cellular membranes, they fall apart. And that's where things like Lipitor and some of your statin drugs, if they are given at too high of a rate, can literally lead to people having rhabdomyolysis. So you don't want to necessarily play around with that if you can help it. Now, what we're going to find is that we store fat obviously in our fat cells, so getting them into our muscles is a bit of a to-do. We have natural intramuscular triglycerols, so there's going to be storage of little fat droplets inside of our muscles we're going to be able to break down immediately for energy, along with we're going to have some circulating in our bloodstream, so it's where your blood lipid, typically bound up to albumin that we're going to talk about later, and then obviously being sent around in packets of chylomicrons, which is going to be the biggest packets over here going to the liver, then the very low density lipoproteins, and HDL. So what we see is it's effectively increased, or sorry, not apologies, it effectively went down because of concerns about fat intake. And then we didn't really see a decrease in heart illness. So that's kind of weird, but it's coming down to a number of other factors, fat potentially being one of the components, but like anything else, don't demonize fat. It is very important for your overall life and health, not to mention your nervous system is pretty much made of nothing but fat. So if you like your brain, you should probably make sure that you're getting enough fat. Specifically, we're going to learn more about the omega-3 fatty acids. But right now, we're going to play one of my favorite games called Name That Fatty Acid. So how many of you guys can name a single fatty acid that isn't already up on the slide? And a hush falls over the crowd. Okay, so what we're going to have you guys do is you guys are going to be divided into groups. You and your group, with the power of the internet, we're going to use breakout rooms for this, obviously, guys, on Blackboard. You guys are going to go ahead, and I'm going to put this up in the chat also, so you guys got that. You can copy it on over. So some of you guys are going to be randomly put into group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5. Once you guys are in those groups, you guys are going to go ahead and look up those different fatty acids. Oh, I should probably gamma linolenic acid. Yeah, the spelling's not perfect, so you're going to have to use the joys of autocorrect on Google to help me out there. But then you guys are going to go in and then, so docosahexaenoic acid. It's literally right there on the slide. I could have just written it there, but now you guys know how I like to use this autocorrect to save me on occasion. But you are going to then, in your groups, you're going to write out those answers, and then we come back from working in those groups, and we'll give it 5 minutes. You guys are going to go ahead, and just one person in the group is going to paste into the chat what you guys came up with your information, and then we're going to go ahead and move on. Any questions before we have you guys go ahead and get in those groups? Awesome, guys. So you're going to be randomly assigned into those groups. Remember, guys, what that fatty acid does. So like why it's important, what could be interesting with it, and then the sources we're going to find in the diet. So just to give you guys a hint, DHA, that's welcome to fish oil. So you're going to find that obviously in fish, but you guys can go further than that. Okay. So have fun, guys. And I will see you guys back. Figure 6:50. I'm going to have you guys drop back out by then at least. Okay. So give it some go.
Or is it okay if you drink it as an adult?
Okay, great question. I feel bad now for all the ones in the kids in the class because I didn't record anything that you guys put up there. But yeah, they did a great job with DHA for the brain. Sorry, I'm gonna go through this real fast. EPA for the body, gamma-linolenic acid also for its omega-6 that has some positive effects on inflammation levels. Lauric acid and caprylic acid, both for being useful for being antiviral, fungal, and bacterial, which naturally occurs in breast milk, which then led us to Alex's great question of, do we need breast milk? I will answer your question with a question. How weird would it be to see a gentleman that happened to be my age nursing on a cow in the middle of a field, much less nursing on an adult woman?
Point taken.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like nightmare fuel, doesn't it? It really does. No, but here's the thing. You do not need dairy. Technically, you don't need any food group to live. You could just take a multivitamin and live off of essential like elemental diets where it's like just plain amino acids with some fatty acids and then maybe some carbs so you can think good and you don't feel just gassed all the time. Not that you can't convert to the ketogenic diet, but some people genetically can't. But I digress. So dairy is a food group like any other. Dairy is a very useful food group for the fact that it has a massive caloric yield with a decent amount of some vitamins and minerals, and that's before fortification, that you can easily add to someone's diet. Now, if you're lactose intolerant, no, you should not be drinking milk. If you are uncomfortable with the idea of enslaving species of or other species women to steal their lactation after their children have been ripped from them so they can be maintained lactating for long periods of time, that's cool. You don't have to do dairy either. But it has its pros and its cons. I personally am just not a big dairy fan, so I don't actively avoid it. But at the same time, I do incorporate it on occasion. And if you're working with an athlete that is having a heck of a time trying to maintain their weight, much less gain weight, come on, guys. Ice cream and whole milk. I don't know how else you're going to pound down calories that quickly. Naturally occurring before we get into processed foods. Not that obviously ice cream isn't a processed food, but we'll get into issues with that logic later on. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. If you really enjoy dairy from cow milk, goat's milk, I'm sure there's some other mammals that you can get milk from that I'm not comfortable with. They really don't provide that many benefits, Tori. It's just more of kind of, it gives someone an alternative. So if you're lactose intolerant, I mean, that pretty much takes milk off the table, but you like to eat cereal and you're not some monster that eats cereal with milk or with water or with orange juice or something like that. I don't trust those people unless you're into it, by all means, guys. So if you still want to have some type of milk product, that can be absolutely useful. Same thing if you enjoy yogurt, since there's coconut yogurt, some folks have dairy allergies. They can't have milk products. So it gives you other options. It doesn't give you a massive advantage and no real advantage that I can see other than you could just have the plant that they then somehow turned into milk by itself. No, it's fine. Hey, it's personal preference, guys. There's certain foods, and we'll talk more about personal preference with foods, but that's one of the biggest things to keep in mind. You could write a program. So, example, I could write one for Tori, and she has to do, like we're trying to make her quit being a pitcher, and we want her to be a first base woman. We want her to be a solid 250 plus. So, all right, every day you got to drink half a gallon of whole milk. To which she's going to look at that and go, first and foremost, this entire scenario is absurd. She's not on board. But second of all, she's not on board to drink half a gallon of whole milk because she doesn't find it palatable. So instead, it's like, okay, what are some other options? Well, we've got a litany of other food sources. It obviously becomes more difficult if you're dealing with someone with a true allergy, or if they happen to have some very specific nutrition decisions they're making, like if you're working with someone that's a vegan or vegetarian, which, hey, if that's what you're into and that's what makes you happy, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you're ethically comfortable with murdering and enslaving animals, then keep being a carnivore or omnivore. There's nothing wrong with that. We all create our own morality in life. The key is just have a code and stick to it, but we'll get into that more. Also, hope that chickens never have a history of humans, because we will not look good. And if aliens ever come, hope that they treat us like we treat house cats, not like how we treat cows and chickens or pigs. So let's talk about protein. So it turns out it's really useful. It's going to be a lot of different amino acids, and there's actually more than 20 that occur in nature that are going to be then put into different orders, so that it's going to give us different proteins that we're going to build inside of our own cells that have a variety of different functions that have been covered, I'm sure, to death in a lot of other classes you guys have taken over time. Now, each amino acid is made up effectively of 5 different simple parts. There is a hydrogen atom on one side. There is an amino group on one end, hence the amino side. There is going to be a carboxylic acid group, so hence the amino acid part. Then you have a chiral carbon, which is the center carbon. And then off on the bottom side, you have what's known as the side chain, sometimes referred to as the R group. And this is where you have the difference between glycine, glutamine, leucine, tyrosine, tryptophan, proline, histidine, methionine. We could keep going, but you're already bored enough. So proteins are really important for literally the structure to all our cells in our body. Now, don't be wrong, that phospholipid bilayer, the membrane of every single cell in your body, that's made by fat. But all the cytosolical proteins that keep it together, that costamere, if you remember from Advanced X Phys to Alex, I'm not trying to cause you to go into like shakes or otherwise, that's all made of protein. That's what structurally keeps your cells together. It is going to make sure that we have effectively the ability to move. So that's that actin and myosin we're talking about, motion. It's going to be a component inside of our bone structure, along with obviously calcium and phosphate, in order to give us that type of structural integrity so we don't break them. Now, if we have enough protein in our diet, we're going to be able to replace our natural losses. Now, depending on how you're built, you're more likely to die from a lack of protein when it comes to starvation than you are to die from a lack of calories from breaking down fat. And the reasoning for that being is every single day you're losing skin cells, you're losing hair. And when you're like me, you're getting older and you're losing hair a little bit faster. You're going to be naturally digesting part of your own digestive system. So you're turning over a lot of protein every single day. So you have to replenish that. Now, obviously, if you're trying to carry around a greater than normal amount of muscle mass, you're trying to build muscle, we're going to need a little bit more protein, but we're actually going to learn you have the highest protein demands whenever you happen to be effectively trying to maintain lean mass while you're trying to lose fat mass. So there's a lot of different uses for protein in the body. The key is, like anything else, we want to make sure that we're getting it in over the course of the day, and that we're making sure that we're typically trying to do this in a good 3 or 4 boluses, and making sure that we are getting it from food sources that happen to agree with us. And you're, for the most part, not going to have a lot of issues with getting enough protein in your diet for your Homer Simpsons, like your average person that's not trying to do much. Some of your athletes that are getting into like a hardcore cut for like a bodybuilding show or otherwise, that's when you're going to have to make a little bit more careful decisions. But even then, it's not too bad. The key is when you get to people that are true vegans, unless you're doing supplementation, you're gonna have a heck of a time to match those protein demands without going too far over on your other calorie demands when you happen to be trying to lose weight. So we're going to cover this obviously a lot more at length later on, but as of right now, do any of you guys have a question about protein you'd like me to field? Rock and roll. Thank you, Dalton. Now, we then have water, which is technically a macronutrient in that how much of it you need per day. However, it doesn't provide us any energy, but it is the solution that every single cell in your body is essentially in. Every single cell inside of your body happens to be floating in water. Aside from the exterior of your body, there's just a whole lot of water inside of you. And this is important for obviously when we talk about our movement of our joints, that we happen to have enough fluid, synovial fluid inside of them so they're going to move. We're going to obviously be able to release this water from our sweat glands onto our skin surface. That in turn is going to help us remove heat and sweating. And it's going to be obviously where every single chemical reaction in the body occurs. It's all inside of water, and we're using it as a way to get rid of waste products, aka peeing out. Now, how much water you're taking in per day is going to effectively always be related to effectively how physically active you are. So, 2 to maybe 3 liters, depending on how big you are. Notice, guys, that's only about half a gallon to 3/4 of a gallon per day. So we're not trying to be bodybuilders, but if we're burning a whole lot of calories on top of that, that's where we're going to have a much greater demand for water than if we happen to be obviously incredibly sedentary. And you can get a lot of your water in through your diet. Think about if you guys happen to be eating a diet that's very heavy in fruits and vegetables, and especially even super high water content fruits like watermelon and really the other melons in general. So you might see in certain situations, if you're exercising a lot in the heat and you happen to be doing huge volumes, you're going to need to take in much more water during the day. And as we're going to get into much later on in the class, the basic idea is just follow your thirst. If you happen to be thirsty all the time, you just need to drink more water. But if you've got some good satiety, you're feeling good, you're not feeling nauseous because you don't have enough calories or otherwise, then by all means, you're fine. You don't necessarily need to carry that gallon of water around all day. If anything, you can have an issue with doing too big of boluses at once, where then you're not able to effectively get as much of it to go into those joints and other connective tissue or tissues in general. Instead, you're just filtering out because of the greater blood volume that you have in your kidneys. If they're functioning well, they're just going to get rid of it. Now, we then have our vitamins, minerals, and then trace elements, which are our microminerals. So vitamins are organic compounds, meaning they're carbon-based. They don't provide us energy from digestion. Instead, they typically work as cofactors in enzyme processes throughout the body, which quite frequently are energy-producing steps. Now, minerals are going to be obviously components of cofactors in reactions. They are going to obviously be used structurally and be incorporated into a number of very important carrying molecules inside the body, like hemoglobin when it comes to iron. Now, overall, it's typically about 15 vitamins and 15 minerals that are going to be pretty important. We're going to touch on ones that are going to be a little bit more likely for people to be inadequate in, and that actually happens to be vitamin D and magnesium, if we're talking about Americans. And vitamin D is fascinating because you can get it from just getting enough sun exposure. So if you can just get out in front of the day star enough every single day with enough of your skin showing, you effectively never have to supplement or utilize vitamin D, because it turns out you're going to be able to synthesize it from the exposure. And vitamin K is fascinating because your own digestive tract is going to be producing this, and you're going to find that, once again, some folks don't need to get as much vitamin K in their diet, which is also interesting because vitamin K introduces a concept known as triage theory, which we've touched on before in some of our classes, but it's a really important concept to understand because it's currently really going through a lot of developments when it comes to nutrition. And the basic concept there, guys, is that effectively the foods and the nutrients that we take in, your body is just trying to prioritize immediate survival. It's not trying to prioritize long-term health. It's just trying to get you through today. So it's going to make certain sacrifices today that are detrimental to your long-term health, but in the short term allow you to perform. So a question I posed in exercise physiology earlier this week is, which is more important? Being able to run away from the lion right now and you might break a bone later, or not being able to run away from the lion right now, but you won't break your bones? Which do you think is probably the better one to do? Indeed. So, and speaking of, since Tori happens to be one of the athletes here, how often do you see the kids on the track and field team, specifically the cross-country runners, in walking boots?
Not often.
Come on.
Oh, yeah, those ones would get it a lot. I thought you meant regular, like day-to-day shoes. I'm like, no, they usually have special shoes for that.
Yes, sorry, they're in the, yes, the protective boots and otherwise.
The medical boot, yes.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. In the sport that you play at, there is the liability that you can get nailed by a 80+ mile an hour softball in the ankle, which would make sense. Like, that's physics. The ankle probably explodes. You need to be in a boot. Now, or, you could get, maybe you throw some chin music at a girl. She takes that personally, rushes the mound, and, goes Tanya Harding style on your knee. Sorry. Hopefully there's never that type of violence on the mound, just bad scenarios. What thing is attacking a cross-country runner? What other person do they have to overcome? What are they hitting all the time?
The ground, like gravity, the force.
Yeah, and they're pretty big, massive people. They're like refrigerators running, right?
Definitely not.
Oh yeah. So they're breaking themselves just running away. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
And that's because their body is using calcium to allow their muscles to contract, but they're taking that calcium from their bones, and over a long enough period of time, that's where we're getting ourselves into stress fractures. That's not a judgment on those kids. Like, you got to be doing freaking work to go to the point where you're actually breaking yourself from just doing your sport. Like, no offense, Tori, but allegedly, I know of a teammate of yours that maybe tore their labrum pitching a softball at a really high velocity. And it makes sense. Like, you're doing a really high speed, really high power rotational movement for gosh knows how many repetitions over the length of your guys' career. Like, that checks out and it sucks. But at the same time, we'll get there in a moment, Alex. We need to make sure that we're obviously always getting in what we need. Now, here's where things get complicated out, because it's not just calcium that's important for bone mineral density. It's calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, and vitamin K are all important for the mineralization of your bones. So you need to make sure that you're getting enough of all of those nutrients. And there's a possibility that they could have some potential situations where they're not getting it enough. Because it's not like they just did one long run and then all of a sudden they're in the walking boot. Instead, is they've been training at a hard volume with lots of miles for some of them. Potentially, we're getting into the decade range of training. And so if you've just been under fueling for a long period of time, eventually you're going to get yourself into some major issues. It's the equivalent of, if we think of a much simpler example, like a weight gain or a weight loss. If I told you right now that for the next year, every single week, you're going to lose half a pound, how many of you guys would be like on board for that? And I'm sure like some of you guys would, some of you guys are all heck no. But if you kept that same, so if you lose just half a pound a week, 52 weeks in a year, that's 26 pounds in a year. So, I mean, I'm sure just about everybody here, like, you definitely would be markedly smaller. Now, if you kept that up for, we'll use me as an example. If I kept up that pace for 8 years, I would have long since past died, because that would have brought me to a body weight of less than 50 pounds. So we can see that weight change. We can see those changes and we can quantify it quickly. but bone mineral density, unless you're using the DEXA scanner like we have in the XPhys lab, is a really hard thing to quantify. So you can really see what is trending and how your athletes are trending. Does that make sense to you, Alex? Great question, guys. So we then have our phytonutrients. So these happen to be not a vitamin, not a mineral, but still organic compounds that are going to typically come from plants that have a variety of potential positive effects on our overall health. Now, this is where we're going to be talking about, and we're going to get into some more interesting ones, where you've probably seen the whole lutein, lycopene, astaxanthin, these different type of carotenoids you're going to find in foods and how they can potentially increase our health. But, oh, nice, Kristen. Also take a look at that. So we do need to have an appreciation for, it's not just about making sure we're getting in all of our macronutrients, which is the biggest effector of our body weight changes and our body composition changes, but also our micronutrients, then understanding that as science keep marching forward, it's going to learn more about a lot of these phytonutrients and its effects on long-term health. And also that makes me insufferable around some people. And then some other polyphenols. And in fact, we have a nice list here on the bottom that we're going to go ahead and have you guys again work in groups to go ahead and talk about, excuse me, and their positive potential effects on overall health. Now, we are going to only go and do effectively 5 groups. So we're not going to worry about alpha lipoic acid. It just potentially helps a little bit with insulin sensitivity, and acetylcysteine, which is a precursor for glutathione. So instead, what we're going to do is have you guys look into cyanidine 3-glucoside, resveratrol, sulforaphane, and curcumin, and their effects potentially on health. So and you guys are going to be in those 5 groups. So group 1 is going to be doing curcumin. Group 2 is going to be doing glutathione, 3-resveratrol. 4 cyanidin 3-glucoside is referred to as C3G. And then group 5 is going to be in sulforaphane. Do you guys have any questions before we randomize you guys into another 5 different groups for our final breakout room component for the evening? Awesome. Thank you guys for giving me feedback. So let's go ahead. It's 7:17. Haha, clock just changed. Give you guys at least 5-6 minutes. So same thing where you guys can post it back in when you guys get back out. So have fun, get after it. Nathan, buddy, come on, man. You can't go away from keyboard all the time. Yeah, great job, Lewis. Absolutely. Resveratrol comes from grapes, berries, and even some peanuts, which is fascinating. Oh, hey, Norms, buddy. And it does have some potential cardioprotective effects, along with perhaps having some positive effects on effectively glucose, insulin sensitivity type work. So good. Glutathione, major antioxidant, absolutely. Nice. And with the glutathione piece, where it's obviously a major antioxidant for just, avoiding reactive oxidative species stress, which we'll talk about later on in the class, but effectively just through metabolism, you create these reactive oxidative species, which will literally just wreak havoc on your DNA and do some major damage, which can be a potential causative mechanism of cancer. And that's where things like maybe N-acetylcysteine and otherwise can work as precursors, what's useful. I'm not quite sure about the Japanese knotweed myself, Kristen, but there's a lot of obviously fruits and vegetables that naturally are, or I guess technically peanuts are a legume, that can be potential sources. But the bigger component here is to make sure that, yeah, if you're just eating a diet that has a lot of grapes and blueberries, it sounds like you're eating a healthy diet because you don't need to drink the wine. You can just eat the freaking grapes. But I guess people that really like to get drunk like to find other excuses. Yeah. I don't know about curcumin being magic, but it definitely has some positive effects on being anti-inflammatory. It has really, really poor bioavailability. So it can definitely have a lot of potential uses for being kind of that anti-inflammatory effect. So RA, guys, is going to stand for rheumatoid arthritis in this example. And so like anything else, there's still more research that needs to be done, but it gives you a good excuse to add more turmeric on the foods you eat. But the amount you'd have to have for an actual yield, that's where you get into dosage things, and that's where you can get a little silly. But that's okay. All right, guys, where's my sulforaphane group, and where is my C3G, sandinin 3 glucoside group? Norbs, we live in the suburbs. It's not dangerous here. Suburbs. Awesome. Awesome. Good job, Raquan. Absolutely. Yeah, sulforaphane being very important as another anti-oxidant, but really seeming to have more positive effects on being anti-cancer. And it might be because it's more of a hermetic stressor on the body, essentially tune your immune system to what it needs to do. C3G. Yeah, good. Nice. You're also going to see C3G in blueberries and blackberries. So another reason to eat a healthy, quote unquote, diet. So what questions, comments, concerns do you guys have for me before we're going to pivot and just talk a little bit and kind of work on that the metabolic project and kind of get a little bit of a head start on that. Any questions, comments, concerns? No? Okay. So what we have here is effectively taken directly from my friend Mike Israel's presentations before, which effectively is, what are the biggest components when it comes to getting someone to hit their dietary goals? So the first and largest one is flat out calories in and calories out. All of us could live on a diet made up of nothing but Twinkies and Ho-Hos and lose weight, because we would only get to eat half a Twinkie and half a Ho-Ho every single day. And you'd be in such a massive caloric deficit, you'd be hemorrhaging weight left and right. Now, after we're looking at the calories in, calories out, then we're getting our macronutrients. Are we getting enough protein to effectively maintain or increase that lean body mass we're trying to have? Are we getting enough carbohydrates to maintain our total work intensity that we're trying to perform? Are we getting enough fat to maintain our hormonal profile and overall health and recovery? Then we get into nutrient timing. So we're dividing up that protein evenly throughout the day. Are we doing those carbs pre, peri, and post workout? Are we getting in the fats far away from workouts? Are we getting in multiple meals per day so that we're going to time things out so we're spiking effectively our blood amino acid levels frequently enough? Then we can get into food compositions. So now we're talking about eating literally nicer fare, of eating higher quality choices of foods. And then finally, we will get ourselves to the use of supplements. So are we going to get on like an ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin stack, ECA stack, which was something that was very popular when I was younger as a means to help yourself lose body fat? Or are we going to get into something like trying to utilize Well, let's face it, if you're using anabolic agents, growth hormone or otherwise, you're playing out of a completely different deck, and you're going to make a lot more interesting and aggressive progress than most other human beings will ever be able to do. But like anything else, thinking through what is going to be the biggest component. Now, when we're thinking about that total calories in to calories going out, well, let's contextualize it first, because it's that amount of energy you need to use in order to, because we use the big C calories or kilocalories when we're talking about what we're using when we're exercising. We're going to have to effectively increase 1 liter of water 1 degree Celsius, or if we convert that over an American, it's about 1 quart of water, 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit? Whatever. So we're just trying to run this balance, which is we have the amount of proteins, carbs, and fats we take in, that's our calories in, and then our calories out is going to be the thermic effect of food, physical activity, and a resting metabolic rate. Now, the fourth part here, and it's technically an offshoot of physical activity, is what's known as non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this could be like you tap your fingers, you tap your toes. That could be netting you an extra whopping 10 to actually maybe like 200 calories per day of just fidgeting a lot. And that's actually ways that some folks have a hard time gaining weight because they literally fidget it off. And then other folks, when they start physical activity, they naturally decrease their non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So they're actually not burning more calories than they thought, and they're not building that deficit like they thought they are. But the key is when we happen to have more calories coming in than going out, we gain weight. When we happen to have more calories going out than we're taking in, we lose weight. Human bodies all operate within the wonders of thermodynamics. You can't get around that. So if you try to use a diet to gain weight and you don't, you messed up somewhere. You try a diet to lose weight and you don't, then something was wrong in your calculations, in your applications, because like anything else, it can work. But one thing, and this is far more reaching than what we're really trying to touch on tonight, but it isn't really big, important key to understand, guys, which is whatever method you use to lose whatever amount of weight you choose to lose is going to be incredibly similar to the method you're going to have to use to maintain that weight loss. So once you've lost the weight, if that was your goal, or gained the weight and that was your goal, you're going to have to maintain that methodology or something very similar to it for the long haul in order to keep effectively the weight on or the weight off. And that's where a lot of people fail, is they effectively forget the fact that the maintenance phase is a perpetual phase. You don't stop effectively maintaining your body weight. It's something that you're going to have to constantly work at and make choices about if obviously that happens to be your goal. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and break down what effectively is going to be our estimates of how many calories you're going to go ahead and burn in a given day, depending on, oh, great question, Kristen. Okay, I could wax and wane poetic on that for probably an hour. So does the idea of a set point have any scientific root? Technically, but not really. Instead, all of you, either right now in the lecture or listening to this later, you weigh exactly how much you should if you measured every single calorie from birth until now that came into your body and that you burned and lost. You weigh exactly as much as you should through those thermodynamics. So there's really no such thing as a set point, so much as there happens to be a natural point where people tend to fluctuate very closely around, because we are beings of habit. If you're consistently doing the same type of exercise and you're consistently eating the same amount of food and the same food choices, your weight is going to eventually stabilize at a given spot. Now, the reason I don't like set point arguments, which is flat out, we live in a world that gives us a myriad of incredibly palatable, really tasty food. And because of this, we have the opportunity to gorge ourselves at any given time. We have bodies that are really good at storing fat and effectively really good at not burning calories if they don't want to. And with those powers combined, thanks to your own genetics, thanks to your lifestyle, it's really, really easy to put on weight for most people. And so the human body is not meant to be highly physical. I mean, think about it. And once again, that's really cool that you did it, Kristen, but most people would think of it's borderline patently insane to walk the Appalachian Trail, which is effectively going through all of the highest points of effectively the Eastern US recreationally, when you have no reason, you don't have to do that on foot. I mean, how many other people would prefer to just do that and let the ATV do all the work, and instead they just have to push on the pedal and drive? Like, that's it. Because like anything else, the person that is eating a lot of hyperpalatable food all the time, that's what our, cave brethren would have been all about. Like, hold on, why? They would look at what I did earlier and say, hold on, you went to a place and you picked up heavy things and put them down and then put them right back where they started. Why did you do that? It didn't give you food. It didn't give you shelter. Doesn't seem to be helping with getting you more progeny. Why? Because we live lives that are kind of a little bit mismatched for how we're effectively built to be, which is mildly paranoid mammals on the Serengeti. So with that mismatch, you can obviously have some differing natural weights that people tend to stabilize around. And I still think I could go a lot further, but is that making sense right now? Kristen, do you want me to go deeper on that? Or is that pretty good for tonight?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not, someone's a bad person because they're 300 pounds and I don't know, 5'5". We all have genetic predispositions, and there are people with legitimate medical issues where, like, it's got lipidemia. You get some folks that have, thyroid disorders where they literally I don't think you're ever going to meet somebody that weighs 300-400 pounds that isn't aware of the fact they weigh 300-400 pounds. You know what? If they're happy at that body weight, more power to them. You know what? Because I don't know about you guys, but I am working hard on trying to be happy, and it is a struggle on a daily basis. So if you happen to be happy with your body size, that's not necessarily, it's not a set point. It's like I'm just stuck here. Like, no, your life, like you, will change, and at certain points you might gain weight, you might lose weight, but as long as you're happy with how you're physically relating to your environment, more power to you. So, but don't fall prey to the fact that we're just stuck and we're meant to be one thing or another. Well, turns out we choose to make a life that turns us into one thing or another. And I'm getting way too poor man's philosoph this evening, and I'm out of my element, but let's go ahead. I want you guys, we've got our caloric need formulas. We're only going to look at the Harris Benedict tonight, and then we're going to be done. So if you are male, you need to go ahead and take your weight in kilograms. Remember, guys, just so you guys have it, 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. Okay. And then effectively 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. And then 1 year in the imperial system is the same as 1 year in the metric system. So don't worry about that one. So when you guys are ready, go ahead, use the calculators on your phone. Otherwise, and I want you guys to put up in the chat what your initial BMR came out to be, okay? And so for most of you guys, that initial BMR is going to be somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 calories. And then I want you guys to go ahead and but multiply that BMR by any of these energy coefficients, and then go and put that up in the chat, just as kind of a ballpark. In theory, this is how many calories that I'm burning every single day. So take your time, guys. When you're ready, let's go ahead and we'll put that up in the chat. Whenever you're ready, guys, like I said, that initial BMR number you come to, go and put that up in the chat, and then go ahead and multiply it by that activity modifier. And we refer to light exercise, it's hour-long sessions to kind of give you guys a ballpark. And then go and put that also up in the chat. Rock and roll, Alex, that looks realistic. Kristen, we haven't met before, but I'm sure that looks pretty realistic. Rock and roll. Good, good. The numbers you guys are coming up with are looking pretty well spot on. Yeah, Raquan, you are a large human. That makes perfect sense. Tori, that looks a little low just because I know you're quite tall, but that could definitely be correct. Yeah, Jared, that looks accurate. That looks accurate, Haley. Looks about right, Lewis. Looks about right, Lucas. Good. Anyone having issues with figuring out their math or figuring out what their answer is, you guys can go ahead and unmute yourself or go ahead and put that up in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Sorry, are we just finding BMR or are we doing it times the exercise to find the daily
Bingo. So do
calories?
that initial BMR and then go and multiply it.
Multiply by the calories.
Bingo. Mhm.
Awesome.
For the actual activity. Ooh, nice. Okay. So keep putting it up there, guys. Yeah, that looks about like what happens when you actually have a bunch of softball practice and everything else. Still think they might be underestimating you a bit, Tori, but that's okay. Nice, Brent. So as we can tell, guys, first and foremost, all of these formulas are going to have about a good plus or minus of about 20%, meaning just because Brent was the last one to put it up there, his actual BMR might not even be over 2,000 calories per day, might be actually like less than 1,900 calories per day, or it could be as high as say 27, over 2,700 calories per day. So we have these initial estimations, then we're going to run them for a little while and see if we're getting the type of weight change we're looking for. And that's the big thing. We can have our initial diet plan, but then we can figure out, is it working, and then modify from there. Good question that Kristen had, which is, why would BMR not be the same as little to no exercise? Because the BMR is effectively it's your energy expenditure for a person that effectively is pretty much not completely comatose, but pretty close to it. Like you'd be living in a hospital ward, getting up to go to the bathroom and then sitting right back down. Like barely moving whatsoever. So the little to no exercise, just the nature of you guys getting up and say, walking to classes, climbing stairs to get into your apartment, anything along those lines, that is going to naturally jack up your caloric demand. Obviously a little bit. And once again, these are estimates, so they can be pretty far off depending on the individual. And in fact, there's some literature that shows that most people are really good at overestimating how many calories they burn from exercise and underestimating how many calories they're eating. And that mismatch obviously lends itself to making it a lot easier for people to gain weight. But the good news is, guys, on that metabolic project, congratulations, you guys have the first BMR equation solved. So save your numbers. Make sure you guys write that down and start on that assignment. And yeah, Alex, that looks about right, bud. Looks about right, depending on how much you weigh these days, because obviously I haven't seen you in a while, but you know, that definitely doesn't look too far off. So, and there's two Alexes in the class, so we don't even know which Alex that I'm talking about for those of you guys watching this live. Do you guys have any questions over anything else? You're going to have your first quiz next week, due before we get into class. You're going to have the chapter homeworks for both 1 that we went through tonight and chapter 2, which we'll be getting into next week. And then we're going to keep building on all of this. Do you guys have any other questions? Otherwise, that's all I wanted to cover for our first class meeting. And this is about how long I am going to try to have our lectures be throughout the class. So like I said, we're probably not going to go the full time, but obviously I want to make sure that you guys are getting something out of it. So any questions, comments, concerns before we call an evening? The quiz is scheduled for tomorrow. Rock and roll. Well, I will get that modified so you guys got a little bit more time to take it. Oh, that's the homework quiz. Yeah, you better take that homework quiz by tomorrow. It's easy. It's just the multiple choice stuff over what we've already talked about tonight. So you've got a solid head start on it. If there's no other questions, guys, let's go ahead. And yeah, thank you guys for our first lecture. Stay safe out there. If you have questions, comments, concerns, remember, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to go through this stuff with you guys. And I will see you guys, if I don't see you in person beforehand, I will see you guys in class on Thursday night. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe. Bye-bye.